Welcome to the DGD Podcast. As always, Robert Reynolds. Guys, got a lot to talk about today. Recent news, I don't know, came within the past couple days, talking about TIAA Bank needing to do some renovations. That's forcing Jacksonville out of the stadium. So that obviously means it has an impact on the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. So we're going to talk about that. Also, today is graduation day for those UGA undergrads. Congratulations to all the graduates and grad school that happened yesterday. So congratulations from the DGD podcast there. Um, Listen, I'm excited to hear about it. Uh, and I'm glad to talk about this cocktail party situation. I think it's going to be pretty interesting to hear. But first things first, the show is brought to you by Apotheos Roastery. Uh, Great, excellent coffee. I say this every time. I'm not lying to you. It's amazing coffee. Best coffee I've had. Located in Kennesaw, Georgia. 30 years of craft and expertise there. So you know you're getting 30 years of quality experience in your cup every time you make that batch of Apotheos coffee. Go to dgdpodcast.com/Apotheos. Shop their selection of K cups and whole bean coffee, ground coffee, however you want it. And each bag that you get from the website is 20% will go to the Classic City Collective because Apotheos is the Classic City Collective official coffee and cold brew sponsor. So fun way to support the collective indirectly while also getting you some excellent quality coffee. Thank you, Apotheos. Toxic Twinkie says, made it to a 48th birthday, Pat, driving to GA to see family and going to Athens tomorrow. Happy birthday, Miss Amy. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. That's right. When one of the Brigadiers has a birthday, we'll let you know. So happy birthday. I thought that was interesting. Before we get started, though, there were a couple things that happened since our last episode that kind of made me have to talk about. First things first, Minister Sports. I don't know the guy's name. I just know the Twitter handle. Minister Sports dropped a video talking about Georgia going back to the depths of 8-4, and it just made me sit here and ponder if that was real, if that was reality or not. And honestly, if that is reality, and you think that, I don't genuinely know how to change the wording on this, but I just think that's a mistake to think that that's going to happen. Just going to leave that there. I don't see that being a smart move, betting on Georgia like that. So I would not do that. Just my thoughts there. But no, like obviously you mentioned talking about Kirby. You know the team is built right in the back of an insane defense. But I don't think people understand the offensive evolution that took place last year. I think that should not go unnoticed whatsoever. I think you have to take note of that. I find that hard to believe that that's an accurate thing. But if it is what it is. It is what it is. But yeah, I was baffled to hear that. Laughable to me, but to each their own. To each their own. But I want to talk now. Let's kind of transition over to the cocktail party. So, recent statement comes out talking about I think 2025 for a couple seasons. TIAA is going to go under some renovations. Like I said, forcing the Jaguars to play elsewhere, which would in turn mean that have Florida and Georgia, right? That battle every time the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. That means that now you're going to look at this being hosted elsewhere. And what better way than to do a home and home? The guy actually suggested Georgia and Florida doing a home and home, and I'm in favor of that. Listen, there's still a plethora of fans, more so South Georgia, which rightfully so. That's 5 hours away, so I can't necessarily be mad about that. Going to Athens, it's closer, right? To go to Jacksonville and watch that game every year than it is to travel up. But it's just that you're going to get a mixed bag. And it's also been there since 1933, if I'm not mistaken, except for when in the mid 90s when the stadium was being built, I believe it was, or doing some renovations as well, which our Juan Daniels actually played the home and home series. That's just my thoughts. But personally, right, and I've never been to the cocktail party, so I don't necessarily have as much standing ground here. But I would love to see a home and home, just to see what it's like, right, in the modern state. Kirby Smart has mentioned that you have a situation where Georgia loses a recruiting weekend once, every year for that matter. So hosting a home and home, you get that extra recruiting weekend every other year, if you will. And he's been adamantly advocating for that. So I thought that was very interesting to think about because, currently the recruiting guidelines for that are kind of off. What they just made recent news talking about, the schools can offer the tickets or whatever for free or whatever, but that don't really mean the same as hosting kids in Athens, knowing the Gators are coming to this, knowing they're basically going to that, right? So I think in that case, Kirby does have a good point. If you can host Florida, right? If you can host Florida, and Jesus Christ, Adonis. Figured typical Adonis response. Favorite mascot on the thumbnail plus hairy dog. Yeah, I knew this was going to be right up your alley, Adonis. But no, I think you go back to it. Hosting the Florida Gators in Athens, right, and being able to bring the recruits along and host them on campus would be huge. I think it would be absolutely huge. When this last happened, we were not in the state of Georgia football that we are now. It's a marquee weekend in the minds of Georgia football fans playing Florida, whether they're garbage or actually a legitimate team. So I just think that, right, seeing that level of recruiting, I think it'll be interesting to see what kind of impact, right? Like, there's a lot of people that said that it doesn't necessarily hurt, but at the same time, until we see that, and I'm kind of on board with the notion that I'd like to see what it does, because we know how the stadium is, at least from a TV perspective. I think it'd be interesting to see a home and home in today's world. I just think it would be nuts, especially with how Georgia's playing. Oh, it'd be absolutely ridiculous. Toxic Twinkie says, Pat said we just passed Beamer's Chicken Bucket in Columbia. Uh-oh. But so in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are. Would you prefer it to be home and home, or would you prefer it to be in Jacksonville? Because I think the contract also is coming up for renewal. So I think you might see a situation where they have, on the new contract renewal, you have it where you see home and home for a couple years, and then they might try to bring it back to Jacksonville. There's a lot of money that goes into to the game. Both teams get it for hosting, for going to Jacksonville. So I think that's always been a driving factor as well. There's just so much money invested into the Jacksonville scene for the game that it makes it hard for the teams to really move away from. So I think that's another reason. Just thinking about that right there. I just think that I would just love to see a home and home. I really would. I'd love to see Georgia go down to the swamp and just drop a 50 burger to get that revenge that Spurrier did to us. I would just absolutely love to see us drop 50 on them, just in their own stadium, ideally. That's just my thoughts on that. Oh, excuse me. So, I just think that would be so much fun to watch. Yeah, but I think another thing, a counter argument for this is you're looking at the Jacksonville situation is kind of being unique to college football because you don't really see a lot of rivalry games played in neutral sites like that. I mean, the one that comes to mind, you're looking at the Red River Shootout, right? Texas, Oklahoma, being played at the state fair, things like that. But when you look at the bigger rivalries, you see the home and homes, and it makes you wonder, right? If you're a fan that goes to the neutral site, if you will, what it would be like for home and home, right? And I think with this being said, when the renewal happens and the renovations take place, I do think kind of getting a taste of a home and home, it'll definitely help us analyze from a fan's perspective. What does that look like? What does that look like? Like I said, I'm all for it. I'm all for trying the home and home. I think, obviously, I think it's worth monitoring for me just to believe that, Um, but I definitely think that's something that should be looked at and see if that's something that, we should take into context moving forward. I really do. Um, and maybe is it worth making it a permanent thing, or do they continue to make Jacksonville the permanent spot, right? Like you're going to hear a bunch of different sides on this. But not ultimately though, I do think you look at overall the stadium just going through the renovations. I'm curious to see what kind of renovations they do, just to kind of get a feel for what Georgia, what Florida can look at when it opens back up. Is it going to be more enticing to host recruits? If I don't really know, we really don't know. Um, but nonetheless, I do think you have a situation, a certain situation that you kind of get the best of both worlds, right? Where you're more than likely you're going to keep it in Jacksonville, but the home and homers folks, I think you'll see that as well. So again, I'm excited to see it home and home. I think it'll be, yeah. I'm just saying, I can't wait to see that. I obviously want to hear that in the comments, see what your answers are for that. Um, while we do that, I do want to bring up the time for our second sponsor here, and that is Alumni Hall, located 10 minutes from Sanford Stadium over in Athens, GA. Check them out for your license: Nike, Cutter Buck, Columbia, Yeti, 47, you name it, they've got it. It's all licensed as well. Um, I mean, the polo that I'm wearing today, I got it from there. Comfortable stuff. Obviously, it's like I said, it's completely licensed. Uh, Check them out. DGDpodcast.com/alumni hall. Support your host as well, whether it be Juan, Kobe, myself. You have the option to shop through and support us. Also, you can just see what's out there, what's new arrivals, different things like that. So go check it out. Follow them on Alumni Hall UGA on their social media accounts. And like I said, dgdpodcast.com/alumni hall. Learn more about the company and see what they're about. Uh, Thank you, Alumni Hall, as well. But obviously, we've talked about that take, right, with the cocktail party. Um, I'm all for the home and home. I would like to see it more home and home. I think that's something that, listen, I think that would be just amazing TV to watch. You look at the stadium environment in Jacksonville. I understand it's a week-long thing, right? It's not just go down for a game day and then come back up. It's people take vacations for the cocktail party because of how long. Like you have a whole week's worth of basically leading up to it. So there's a huge deal with that, and I completely understand that. TriStar says no, it needs to be home and home. Let us know in the chat why you think that, and we'll talk about that in the meantime. But no, I understand, like I said, there's a lot of money to be invested. But if you look at the new TV rights deal that is coming up to be renewed, I think it poses a good question with all the extra money that the SEC is expected to obtain through that and distribute out. Is that money that you're getting from the city, um, is that worth keeping it there? Because what purpose does it serve? Honestly, I think I've heard several different things. You have the South Georgia folks, that it's closer for them. I mean, there's a lot of people with timeshares down there that I've heard too. So there's a lot of people with a lot of money that use that as their game for the year. I don't necessarily think they talk about the distance between the two. And it's literally a flight for Georgia and a bus ride. So it's not necessarily 50-50 even. Um, but that's just here or there again. And also the way recruiting. Kirby Smart's mentioned it. TriStar, the ability to host a plethora of recruits on your own campus, get them the Athens experience in a big time matchup. There's no reason to believe whether Florida could be literally have not a single win, and the place would still be wild as hell. That's just my thought there. The only ones that make sense are OU, Texas, and Army Navy. Now I get those two. I mean, Georgia's one of the three that those are the other two. Um, but the question for me there is the OU Texas. Why does that make sense? Army Navy I completely get, right. When you deal with the armed services and stuff, they look at it completely different. So that one is fair game. I'm just curious to hear the reasoning for the OU Texas making sense. I get it, but at the same time, I just want to hear it. Let's see, but yeah, no, I mean, like I said, I want to see home and home. I just think home and homes make it more fun. If you think about the Iron Bowl, right? Think about the Iron Bowl and all the memorable moments that have happened in these stadiums. When you look at Jordan Hare and Bryant Denny, kick six comes to mind, things like that. Like that matters. And would it make sense if it was in, I don't know, would it make sense if it was in Birmingham? Would it be more meaningful? You know? So I think you look at some of these moments, like being in a home and home state environment. I wonder if they would make more of a lasting impact. But that's also just my thoughts. So because it's exactly in the middle between Norman and Austin as a part of their state fair down there. Yeah, no, I know. I mean, so I get that too. It's more evenly distributed. There's been talks though that you could push for moving it from Jacksonville to maybe alternating as well, where you have 1 year in Jacksonville, the other you have it in Atlanta, and then alternate. I've heard that heard that theory, I should say. I thought that was interesting as well. Um, Ultimately, though, I just still think that when it comes down to it, I think you're still going to see the game be held in Jacksonville. The history, I think the history and the tradition there is probably why you see that stay. But again, I definitely think it's going to be fun to watch. A home and home series, and be able to remember it. Right, I think that's going to be matter. I think that would be huge for that. Excuse me. But now, I do want to bring up the fact that Georgia recently basically rejected the invite to the White House. Excuse me. Now, I don't think that was political, though. A lot of people feel like it could be politically driven, and I don't think so. Kirby Smart went out to say that. I mean, think about the delayed invitation on top of, right, they've just got a bunch of stuff going on. So, I get what Kirby Smart says, and I believe him on that. I just did find it interesting that they didn't invite them. And I think the problem is that part of the delayed invitation honestly could have been a little bit politically driven, knowing the fact that Herschel Walker was running for a political seat. So I'm staying out of it, but I do think that there's some aspect could be politically driven. The thought was there. Yeah, that was just about the schedule at Georgia. Yeah. Let's see. But yeah, no, I just think that's a smart move too. With now that you're getting ready for recruiting and all this other stuff, Kirby takes that shit so serious that I don't think a White House visit is really going to hurt anybody's feelings not going. I mean, hell, the last time that any team went was 2019 LSU. So, you know, everybody looks at it as this kind of tradition that happens, and it's starting to become more and more of a thing where people don't go. I mean, what you look at you look at certain teams in history that haven't went. I think the Golden State Warriors didn't go. I think they rejected the offer as well back in, well, that was 2017. But generally speaking, most teams will go. Um, Again, it was just weird to not see such a delay. Seeing that kind of delay kind of made sense why they're not going. But yeah, that was interesting to hear as well. Let's see. But yeah, other than that, I think we'll wrap it up. We kind of do a quicker show here. We're supposed to do a show Wednesday, had some personal matters. So my apologies for the listeners on podcast that weren't aware of that. But yeah, I think, listen, home and home series, embrace this because it might not be a permanent thing. Um, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. But with that being said, I'm going to wrap this thing up. Have a great weekend. Go Dogs. We'll see you on Monday.